Good morning, comrade. You're listening to WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. This is your weekly Good Morning Comrade, Jeff and Robert here on the show. Robert, how you doing, brother?
I'm all right. It's taking the day off work tomorrow. It's my birthday, so woo.
Yeah, nice.
Fun times.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, happy birthday. We also have a very special guest today. You may hear him on twitch.tv/Central Committee. You have a podcast too, don't you, Mike?
Yes, I also have a podcast called The Reaction Podcast, where we take a deep dive in the personalities and the movements of the right wing. I think this week on Saturday, we're releasing an episode on traditional Catholicism. Where I don't know if you saw that the Pope recently excommunicated 200,000 far-right Catholics.
I am for that. I have
throwing it down. Pope bringing down a hammer. Anyway, Michael from Pennsylvania. Mike from PA is joining us on the show.
Yeah. So check out the Reaction Podcast wherever podcasts are at. Obviously, I have my stream, and you can hear me at various places.
Welcome, and you are also the author, along with Jay Ryder, an article in Geese Magazine. DSA's MPC votes against all-member polling, raising the question, what does democracy look like? Before we get to the question of democracy, which we may or may not get to, it's surrounding, and she's become one of the more controversial, for some reason, figures inside of DSA, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So I guess tell us a little bit about what sort of motivated writing this article and what the sort of dynamics are at play here.
So the first thing I would say is I don't think that AOC is very controversial as far as the membership, the general membership of DSA goes.
Online posters, more or less.
Well, it is a segment of some of the most engaged and self-styled radicals of DSA, right? The people that are kind of on the fringe of DSA itself, which kind of, if you're listening to the radio, you might be like, wait, the fringe of DSA, isn't that the most left-wing group in America? And it's like, well, within the DSA, there are people who consider themselves even more left-wing than DSA, right? Mm-hmm. And that includes people who, run the gamut of incompatible forms of leftism. So you have anarchists, and you have Maoists, and you have, Marxist-Leninists, and you've got Trotskyists. And so while this is a relatively small percentage of the overall, DSA membership, they still have organized what we call caucuses, which are different factions within the DSA. And so for some of those people, they see AOC as, compromising too much with the Democratic Party, not standing firm enough against other Democrats, seeing her as being too willing to compromise or work with Democrats in office legislatively. And, then there is the vast majority of DSA members, probably somewhere in the round, if you were to ask me, 80 to 85% of DSA members who were supportive of her running for president. And there is, there's a tension there. And on the National Political Committee, there are caucuses who are, it's not that they're anti-AOC, it's just they want to go through certain procedures and get certain commitments, and they're kind of slow walking the process of endorsing her for president versus, those radicals I just discussed who don't want to endorse any presidential candidate at all. Mm-hmm. And then you have people who are very eager and they want to get on the AOC train, in the first car. They want to be the first, organization behind her in order to build her campaign, in concert with DSA and have DSA at the heart of it. So those are the various competing factions. And I tried my best, in the article with Jay Ryder to accurately represent everybody's position. And I'm not condemning anyone.
Yeah.
I just have, my own perspective on this, which I think has been informed by, the most recent electoral victories in Denver and Philadelphia, and especially New York City, which is DSA is massively growing in popularity. In fact, we were probably under ambitious this year. I don't think we realized just how vulnerable the establishment Democratic Party is to left-wing challengers. I mean, we had a 15-term incumbent defeated in Denver with a challenger, a 29-year-old Malat Kiros. And we had, in Philadelphia, one of the bluest, I think it is like the bluest or second bluest, seat in the country with Chris Rabb. And then, of course, Claire Valdez and Daria Lisa in New York City. We're seeing massive, massive opportunity for challenges from the left, which is basically unprecedented in American history. And those electoral victories are putting the fear of God into the establishment Democrats. But also, and this is what's important for me, we've seen DSA double in size in the last year as far as paid members. And, the attention that DSA is getting from the larger sympathetic population is growing and growing and growing. And I think you can draw a line of causality there between the two. And so I've tried to encourage the people that have been in DSA for a while to see that opportunity and seize it in order to massively grow our movement while, the thermostatic effects are positive for us. So I'm happy to unpack any of that I just said. Yeah. It's just, I see a once in a lifetime opportunity for those of us on the left to seize, both state power and institutional and social power. And we should seize it by supporting our most prominent member, AOC, in her bid for the White House.
Yeah.
I mean, my first question would be, like, as a one-time DSA member myself, I don't want to oversimplify things, but wouldn't it, like, I've seen what you're talking about with my own two eyes right in front of me in meetings, but like, wouldn't, I understand that every single chapter nationwide is going to be different, but wouldn't kind of a way to just like nip all this in the bud is for just to really define who are the Democratic Socialists of America? What is DSA? Because is it an organization where we're going to do mutual aid? Is it an organization like the PSL where we're like, I don't know, where we're just going to run somebody every now and then, but we're really kind of soft organizing for some kind of, amorphous revolution? And I don't mean that in any kind of a derogatory way, but or is this an organization to run candidates for political office? Because it cannot be all things to all people. And like, just wouldn't answering that just like put an end to all this?
Well, I think the answer to that is that, DSA self-defines itself as a multi-tendency, big tent socialist organization, So it intentionally is like, hey, are you on the left? Join this organization, and we are going to try every strategy, right? Like, some people, for example, want to turn DSA into a political party, but the thing about turning into a political party is there's different strategies for building a political party. Do we start our own party now called Democratic Socialists of America and start, trying to build our own ballot line and run as Democratic Socialists, in elections? Should we run as Democrats within the Democratic Party? Well, how should we do that, right? Should we run in the Democratic Party to destroy the Democratic Party and implode it and try to replace it, a la the Republicans replaced the Whig Party, the conscience Whigs, as they were called back then, which is, prior to the Civil War, there was a faction within the Whig Party that was abolitionist called the Conscious Whigs. And they wanted to, push the Whig Party to take an abolitionist position because the Democratic Republican Party, also known as the Democrats today, was pro-slavery. And ultimately, the Whig Party refused to take a position on the most important issue of politics in the day and therefore imploded. And that's where we got the Republican Party. So, that, not to get too much into the weeds here, what I'm trying to say is that DSA is a multi-tendency organization, and it comes to these questions with the perspective of experimentation. Why we don't know what the right answer is to re-promote the left, like grow the left in America. So let's just say yes, and we'll try that. We'll try running in Democratic primaries. There are some DSA chapters, for example, in Rhode Island. They're running a candidate for state legislature as an independent, right? As we all know, there's a big push for running people in Democratic primaries. There are third-party DSA members that are on the city council in the Working Families Party in Philadelphia, where they have successfully won. seats, outside the Democratic Party. So there is a bunch of different strategies that are being tried. As far as I'm concerned, I don't think it's a bad idea to try all those things, right? Mm-hmm. But I do think, and this is, from my perspective and the perspective reflected in the article, you should look and see what works. You should try things and then measure, right? And then when you see things that are causing big, gains, you should try to replicate those gains, right? And other things, it's not that they're not working necessarily, but they may not show the same growth as a different strategy. And so personally, listen, I love DSA. It's incredible. The growth has been amazing over the last year. But right now we have approximately 120,000 members, which is about the same size as Allentown, Pennsylvania, which is an amazing city, third largest city in Pennsylvania, distant third largest city in Pennsylvania. Okay. I think our organization should be focused on growth, in introducing ourselves to the American people, bringing in as many people as we can to build this kind of alternative to the status quo, which is building a left-wing political machine nationwide that could offer a significant political threat to the establishment Democratic Party, which has largely been in the pockets of, corporations since the early 90s. And when we have this, DSA planting its flag all over the country, it will build a left-wing politics that is actually relevant to regular people.
So,
I hope I answered everything.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I do find, and again, this is going to be a little bit in the weeds, but I'm going to zoom out for a quick second. But a lot of this debate, I suppose, that is happening around the whether or not to endorse AOC is also like extremely procedural in a way that has been that's I find to be like not super productive. I think it takes the eye off of the ball of what the matter at hand is, which is what we've seen be successful in places like New York City and Philadelphia and Denver, which has get that ground level access to a campaign. Start with the campaign as it's being born and make yourself integral to that campaign so that when you get that victory, you can say that's a big skin on the wall. We claim that victory because we were a part of it. And if there is a months-long process that goes on to essentially delay that engagement with said campaign, and you get on towards the end, essentially you're going to be, I guess, treated as such as well.
Yeah, I mean, listen, like as I said before, I am in favor of institutional and organizational celerity or dexterity, which is another way of saying being able to make decisions and commit to them quickly. Yeah. And I feel like the amount of time that you spend in deliberation, like the longer you stretch that out, the less time you're actually taking advantage of the opportunity, right? But at the same time, we want to make sure that DSA has its own identity, right? Because let's imagine everything I want happens, and AOC wins the presidency, 2 terms. She does the Green New Deal. She builds America into a social democratic state. We rein in the American empire. We solve climate change or get significantly toward progress in that. It changes the nature of the Democratic Party, realigns politics a la, FDR and the New Deal, and everything amazing happens. 8 years from then, she's out of office and politics is going to continue. So I would like to see, I don't want to make the same mistake that we made with Obama, right? Which is we built this organization called OFA, Obama for America. And then when he went into office, it was basically shut down. And all that grassroots political effort was deactivated, and there was no continuity for what came after. And we saw the consequences, right? Which is Donald Trump won. Barack Obama handed the keys to Donald Trump. And it's not because, the American people didn't like Barack Obama. It's because a political movement was not created that was able to sustain the energy and put pressure on politics from a left-wing direction. And so learning the lessons of Obama, learning the lessons of Occupy Wall Street and BLM and all these amazing surges of left-wing energy in this country that nonetheless were diffused, it's because we didn't have a hard core political movement that we could build a machine and on, right? And I think that is why, I'm urging in the article that we get on the AOC bandwagon early, almost as a way of taking that energy that's going to go into her amazing presidential campaign and all the hope that's going to represent, but use that to turn people from fans of AOC or fans of the program she's coming up with into active political organizers of their community in a permanent way. And so that we build the bench across the entire country. Right?
So
that's what I want to see.
What you're talking about is creating infrastructure that DSA has ownership over and not any political individual. That's what you're saying,
right.
Yes?
That's right. And when AOC goes into office, right, there's, I think a lot of people that are on that are worried about endorsing her too early are worried that we're not going to have what they call leverage over her, right? We're not going to have control. She's not going to give us co-governing status. And, my argument with that is like, she can't give that to us. We have to earn it. In other words, if we're depending on the sentiment of AOC to listen to us, well, then we're already failing as an organization. What we should do is we say, oh, if you want to draw us into your bosom, if you want to trust us, if you want to help us as a movement grow, then let's take advantage of that and build our own bench and our own legislative wing and our own socialist caucus in Congress. And then it won't be like, hey, AOC, please, listen to us. It'll be like, hey, we have 20 members of DSA or 50 members or 100 members in Congress. And every establishment Democrat, if you don't go along with what we want, you're going to have a primary challenge, right? And have AOC almost worried about the power that she has built, right? Where she is like, okay, we got to make sure my base is lined up. And she'll be much less likely to go to Wall Street like Obama did right after coming into office and say, hey, I'm protecting you guys from the pitchforks, right? I want her to have built an organization that, LBJ famously said to civil rights leaders, make me sign this. I want to give AOC that pressure. I want to help her say, sorry, I have to sign the Green New Deal or else, I want Democratic leaders to be like, oh, if I stand up to AOC, I'm going to get a primary, right? That is the conditions that we need in order to have change in this country. If we're just counting on AOC liking us and quote, sharing with us, we're already failing. We need to build our own leaders. And I actually think that's what's happening, right? If you look at Claire Valdez as an example, she just won the congressional race in New York City. And her race was really interesting because it was a progressive v. socialist campaign, right? And all of the old organizations of the so-called progressive left in America, Working Families Party, all sorts of progressive labor unions and all these nonprofits, they were all lining up behind Reynoso, which was Claire Valdez's challenger, right, in the open seat. And she had DSA. She had, socialists. She had some of the, she had the endorsement of Zohran Mamdani. She had the endorsement of some various left-wing people like myself and Hassan Piker and other, online left commentators. And she won by 20 points.
Absolutely
right?
Clapped it up.
And it's not to say anything against Working Families Party and all the progressive organizations that I hope work with us for AOC.
But what you're talking about is a machine. What you're talking about
exactly.
is a machine.
We need to. And when I say machine, I don't mean a corrupt machine like we have now, which is about handing out money. It's about building an apparatus that is developing, people that are vetted campaigns and candidates. I'll give you another example of talking to me why we need this. Look at Maine, right?
Yep.
And Graham Plattner.
Right? Oh, you read my mind.
Graham Plattner, who I was, and this, I have egg on my face because I critically supported him as a way of defeating, both Zionist, centrist politics and, Susan Collins. The problem is he didn't come from DSA. He didn't come from the movement. He was kind of plucked out of obscurity by some consultants who have done a lot of really good things I like. And, they've have some duds, right? But he was fundamentally not a member of DSA. He was not someone who vetted. He was not someone that had existed in an organizing space for a long time, where, people didn't really. So we were we were kind of building the ship around him, and he wasn't part of the movement, and therefore, there was all this risk of a surprise, and unfortunately, it happened. And so now all this energy that went into this progressive movement in Maine is now, who knows what's going to be the result, right? It's certainly not democratic. Whatever the result is, it's not going to be a democratic choice of the people of Maine. It's not going to be a representative of the progressive left necessarily. Hopefully we get somebody like Troy Jackson or whatever. But the point is that when you don't have an organization, a machine of the left like DSA that is recruiting and training and building up these candidates and recruiting people that have real skin in the game in their community, it's gonna be much more likely that you're gonna have somebody like a Graham Plattner that blows up in your face later, or a John Fetterman, or we've had this happen a couple times now, and the alternative is somebody like Zohran Mamdani, right? Zohran Mamdani is not blowing up in our face, right? Because he spent a lot of time working his way through that New York City DSA machine. And I say that complimentary, right? Like
Sure.
The DSA, he earned his space in the leadership because he was vetted, because he worked hard, because he was winning elections and he was helping other people. And you can see the consequences of that are so positive. I hope I answered your question.
No, you definitely did. And just sort of like what DSA brings to the table, I think it really is important to underscore like what we provide, like what an organization like DSA provides to a campaign. Volunteers, phone bankers, text bankers, every single part of a campaign social media teams, whatever it is, like every single part of a campaign that you could sort of just like marshal people into. If you have an organizational infrastructure to fill those spots in the campaign, that's like a rocket ship taking off into outer space, man. Like you're going to the moon.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess my question is from somebody like we are online nerds who we're really into this stuff, and we follow a campaign from from its birth to its conclusion. But most people don't follow it like this, and I have kind of a just to let you know where my head's at. I don't really believe in electoral politics anymore. And this is from a guy who I was a delegate for Bernie Sanders. I knocked doors for Obama twice in Ohio. I don't, but I vote in every single stupid election that is city, state, and federal that I'm eligible to, because it's like the way I see it is, this is the biggest return on investment for the smallest time commitment possible. Right. And what kind of breaks my brain is with and I'm not talking about the DSA or PSL or DSA or anybody on the left as a organization. I mean, like the actual rank and file members, it's like they can't walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. And it's like, if you want to like organize for all this other stuff, just go take 5 minutes and vote for the best person in the election and get back to work. It's like, no, I'm doing all this, so I cannot participate in electoral politics. And I'm like, I don't understand where that mindset comes from. And like, how do we change that on a level? Like, I know people like the John Brown Gun Club, and these guys can tell you they got beans and rations and bullets and everything else saved up. And I'm like, cool, let's go vote. Nah. And I'm like, all right, well why?
Okay, so there's a lot of things that and I hope I didn't interrupt, but
no, you're good. I'm sorry.
Like this is an important point, because I'm going to try to land this plane because there's a lot of moving parts. Not to mix metaphors. There's a lot of different things going on, but okay. The first is like conversation of faith in electoral politics or reformism or revolution or all these other things. These are purely theoretical discussions that have no bearing on altering the material reality around us, right? So why do I advocate for participating in electoral politics? The answer is pretty straightforward, because regular people care about it. Mm-hmm. And in communication and persuasion, which is the job we're trying to do, we're trying to build this consciousness of a multiracial working class movement to reorient our politics around the interests of regular human beings, not just the elite, right? That's the nature of what we're trying to do. Well, so regular people, and this is even more important, all aspects of our society are controlled by these politicians and the state. Now, the question of electoralism or reformism versus revolution is, how much can we push the state in our direction through participation in society, right? Like, that's really the question you're asking. And the answer is quite a bit, actually. A lot more than you would think. And also, there's a risk of not doing it, which is allowing fascism to consolidate power, right? So capitalism is in a moment of crisis. The United States is in a moment of crisis. Our relative power in the world is declining. There is an emerging power of China, right? And it is offering an alternative system. And it is growing in economic strength. And so the United States, it's positioned as a hyperpower is in crisis. Like, our capitalist class is worried that they're not going to be able to control the world anymore. And so there is the risk of fascist retrenchment. There is a risk of, we can all see these flock cameras going up and these data centers popping up. We all don't want the data centers, right? Nobody's voting for these things, yet they're being built everywhere with our money, with our federal money. And where did that come from? Did you vote for that? Did anyone campaign on that? No, they didn't. But yet it's happening because the richest people in our world want it to happen, and they're overriding our will. And the thing is, we have power. And the state, we can win these elections. We could order these questions. We could change the way that the direction of policy is going, and also prevent, like, actual really bad shit from happening. Oh, excuse me. Bad stuff. From happening. And so that's number one. Number one is, if we don't do it, the fascists are going to have unrestrained power to suppress us. Flock cameras, Palantir, drones,
AI.
God knows, AI, the way that they're planning on using that to try to control the debate. I mean, they're deplatforming people for dissent, right? Mm-hmm. They're threatening to deport people because of their political views, right? Something that didn't exist.
Billionaires abroad.
Right. Right. And then, okay, so that's number one, which is, like, just straight up. First of all, we have to do it, because if we don't, it's going to go in the hands of really bad people. And the second question is just for the perspective. Second point that I talked about which is persuasion. Right. When I run for Congress, I am and I'm winning. Say I win a Democratic primary. I am now going to federal office. Everybody is forced to deal with that. It is not something that could be ignored, right? The Democratic Party probably needs that vote to maybe get Speaker of the House. So they're in a position where just the structure of our government requires you address this person. And so everything they're saying is now a serious point that has to be talked about. And we're talking about billions and billions of dollars of material earned media from Zohran Mamdani, right? From him winning the mayor's race in New York City, everybody in the entire world is now talking about DSA and democratic socialism. It is now a topic that everyone has to reckon with, and all of our political system can no longer ignore it and suppress it. They have to address it. And furthermore, if he's successful, which I don't know what the opinion of your audience is, but the opinion of New York City residents is that he has been an outstanding mayor. And so, and when every time he delivers on some promise, no matter how small, people start to have faith in their own power, right? And it defeats a certain type of apathetic cynicism. And I am of the opinion that what makes people, want to change the world is seeing their beliefs come into practice and then succeeding, and that feeling of solidarity, that feeling of victory incites you to demand more, not less.
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
you're talking about.
So that's why.
Sorry.
Yeah, and just to finish, that's my point.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just that I don't think I think a lot of people in this country want change. I think a lot of people in this country want to live in a more humane society. I think, if you look at the progressive planks of DSA and you talked about the Green New Deal and you went through all the details, 60 to 70% of the American people would probably say, that sounds like a good idea to me. But going from people kind of generally approving to the implementation of these policies, that is where like the realignment can take place. And that's why people like AOC or Zoran can help kind of raise the consciousness of people and make them self-consciously working class, self-consciously interested in supporting their position against the billionaires and kind of reining in the power of capital, not to make it too radical of a formulation, in order to have a more humane society. And I think all of that is very, very plausible and doable, and it will just redound for greater and greater opportunities for more change.
Yeah. So, you listen to WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. This is Good Morning Comrade. Jeff and Robert joined by Mike from PA. You can find Mike from PA's Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Central Committee. I think what you hit on just now is actually really important because, I mean, one of the things that has been seems to confound people, I guess you could say, is that Medicare for All, for example, has been posting at over 50% for like a decade now. Things like the PRO Act, unions are polling at like 60, 70%, like constantly and forever, yet we never get policy out of the government that makes it, because organizing a union is really hard in this country. There's never any kind of policy coming out of the government to make organizing a union any easier. We used to, in DSA a long time ago, talk about non-reformist reforms or transformative reforms that would essentially change the system, not only make it so that we can sort of like put some claws down into some of these positions and bolster bolster some of these things that we talk about, or some of the things that are our basis of power of the working class, like unions, or Medicare for All would just benefit working people just across the board, and use that as, again, like you were just saying, to prove that a better world is possible. Because currently, the whole point of our politics is always like, if you see like a progressive, quote unquote, or a liberal come on Twitter, or like Neera Tanden or something like that, they'll say, "Oh yeah, I agree with Medicare for All," or "I agree with this or that." It's just not real, and it's just not possible. And when you do prove that it is possible, you take away not just their argument, but you take away their credibility, and these people can potentially go away forever. I mean, she'll probably post forever, but like, we don't have to listen to her anymore.
Well, yeah, I think there is a lot of the problem that we have in kind of political discourse in general is there is a number of people who say that idea isn't plausible instead of argue against it. Right? Because they know where the sentiment of the American people is. And so putting on these airs of like, I understand the arcane nature of our system and why that's just not plausible. And it's like, no, it is actually, all of these ideas are incredibly possible. And, for example, Medicare, right? When LBJ passed Medicare in the Great Society, they enrolled all the seniors in America in, I think it was like 20 months. And that was before computers. They were going door to door and just enrolling people, and they did it in 20 months. The idea that we can't do the same for Medicare for All when we have, the internet, computers, the ability to reach people, the improvements in transportation infrastructure that, from America in the 60s. It's just a laughably dumb argument. Yes. And when the idea is actually studied, for example, the CBO and Yale epidemiologists have done separate studies, both estimated that Medicare for All as a program would save somewhere between 30 and 70,000 lives per year and reduce America's spending on healthcare by around $500 billion while also improving the quality. And why is that? Well, because you're getting rid of an entire duplicative system of billing. Like, every insurance company is a private bureaucracy, right? Imagine if instead of delivering police for, or firefighter coverage, we just built 6 competing firefighter companies within your city. The amount of additional costs that would, impose on your system would make it so much less efficient, and that's what we have. We have infinite number of private bureaucracies because insurance companies do not provide care; they provide financing for care. In order to do that, they have to bill, and they have to, they have to compete on various coverage methods and styles, and they have to, they'll have doctors that deny care, or they'll have, and all of this duplication results in trillions of dollars of waste. So if we got rid of that private health insurance model and we consolidated into a single payer model, we got rid of the billing departments or severely reduced them at every hospital. If we got rid of all those duplicative bureaucracies, and instead of spending trillions of dollars on health insurance executives and people that deny care, we spent that instead on nurses and doctors and hospitals. We could provide increased quality, increased health, increased health infrastructure, while also saving money in the economy. And that would be a deflationary effect, meaning prices would go down economy-wide. So save lives, prices go down, quality goes up. Why aren't we doing it? Well, because there is a group of people that are making trillions. And they have a vested interest in protecting their racket. Right? Yes. So they use the money that they steal from you to not provide care to buy politicians. And so there's good news. We can vote them out. And we are, and that is why a president, a run like AOC can work. And here's the thing about America. We've done it before, right? We created programs like Social Security, like Medicare, like, the EPA, as much as they've been degraded since, Ronald Reagan, all the, a lot of these things, some of them are still around. Even though we've had 40 years of attempts to get rid of them, they still persist and they're still providing those services. So we have won these fights before, in American history. So to say it's impossible is silly because we've done it before. We've had the civil rights movement. We have won before. It's just a matter of lining up the belief with action and accountability for those that fight us. Yeah. And so we've been kind of learned helplessness. So it's a matter of time that everybody who's listening takes personal responsibility and stop giving themselves permission to do nothing because it sounds hard. Yeah. Right. Yes. When AOC launched her campaign in 2018, because she was, she was a bartender who worked on Bernie Sanders' campaign as a field organizer, who had an economics degree from BU, and she decided to challenge, I think he was like the number 3 or number 2 member of the Democratic Party leadership.
Crowley.
That was impossible, and that was crazy. But then guess what? She won. Like that, anybody reasonable looking at that would have said to you, this is not going to work. And yet it did. And I think that we saw that again this year. Like the biggest impediment we have as a country right now is this kind of doomerist cynicism and learned helplessness. And that is why our society is falling apart, because all of us have been convinced that we can't win before anybody even really, truly has tried.
No, 100%. Like, I'm just grinning into your ear because Jeff has heard me. Fine.
I'm sorry.
You're 100% fine. It's fine. But no, I'm grinning ear to ear because Jeff has heard me say this a million times, and anybody who's ever is like, I'm a Marine Corps veteran. Like, you can't tell me from Medicare for All doesn't work because I had it when I was in the Marine Corps. Like, the government has figured this out. They've just figured it out for a warrior class, and for a warrior caste. And it's like, this is the same country. You're telling me how much I'm supposed to love America and I'm supposed to, love it or leave it, but this is the same country that we put a man on the moon when we had less technology. That's what's in your cell phone. We can kill anyone from across the planet. Like, don't tell me we can't figure out Medicare. Don't tell me we can't figure out state college for people. That's insane. And it's almost like it's the Democratic Party and they're, you talking about a learned helplessness. It's not seems like it completely is. It's part of the scam, if you want to call it. It's just to say, like, better things, you don't deserve good things. Better things are not possible. We'll only kick you in the crotch once, where the Republican Party will do it 3 times. And it's like, no, I'm done with that. And I can't. It's what turns people off of voting. And it's why, like, in my opinion, the Democratic Party needs to be taken over. Like, it cannot exist. It needs to be completely dismantled, taken over, and just stripped for parts by DSA or whoever. Fine.
Well, if you don't mind, I mean, obviously, I have an opinion on this. Like personally, personally, I've experienced the immense corruption of the Democratic Party machines, and I can give you examples if the audience is interested. But for example, in Omaha, Omaha, Nebraska has what they call the blue dot, right? Which is a left-leaning district surrounding the largest city in Nebraska, Omaha. And there was a progressive by the name of Kara Eastman who won a primary, and the former Democratic representative went and endorsed the Republican. I think his name is Bacon, right? Or in Pennsylvania's first district, which is Bucks County, there was the grandson of FDR's vice president, a guy by the name, I think is Bob Wallace, right? He had massive opposition by the Democratic Party. And again, Kara Eastman, Bob Wallace, they lost their races by like 1%, 2%, incredibly close. And they found themselves getting stabbed in the back. You have an example of
Buffalo, India Walton.
India Walton, Buffalo, right? Where she wins the primary and then they run as a sore loser campaign. Andrew Cuomo in New York City, where he got absolutely destroyed in the primary and ran a sore loser campaign. It worked in Buffalo with India. It failed with Zoran spectacularly. Excuse me. And so,
thank God for that.
I've seen, but here's the thing. Like, the reason why we run in these primaries is because the system is designed for, what we call there's major party status in almost every country, every state in this country. There's something called major party status, right? So if you try to run outside of the top two parties, the difficulty in like ballot access, attention, credibility, it's just, it's incredibly difficult to like be viable as a candidate. For example, there is a man who ran in New York City for city council by the name of Jabari Brisport as a Green Party member. And he ended up getting around 30% of the vote, right? Which for the Greens is amazing, but he lost, right? And the next year he decided to run for, state senate against a IDC member, which I don't want to get down into the weeds, but they were people who ran as Democrats and then caucused with Republicans in the New York State Senate. If you've never heard of that, it's because when the Democratic Party centrists work against their own party to help Republicans, it is kept quiet in the national media. Okay, they are very comfortable with that kind of thing happening. And so when Jabari ran as a Democrat, he won the primary, and now he's been a successful member of Democrat state politics as a DSA member, as a socialist in office. And so the reason why we do it is purely tactical, right? And if you look at the polling, people are open, especially self-described Democrats. They are open to our ideas. They're open to democratic socialism. They're open to leftism. They're just focused like a laser on defeating the right. And you know what? After experiencing Donald Trump, are they wrong? I think defeating Donald Trump and defeating the right is absolutely where our priority should be. So, the reason why I've been saying, if we have the opportunity to win Democratic primaries, if they can't stop us, then we might as well take advantage because of, the way our system is designed. Democrats have an advantage. And two, the Democratic base voters are open to it. And three, defeating Republicans is the goal, right? Defeating the right is the goal. So we could do all three at once. So why not? It's not like being a Democratic primary candidate makes you have to have any position. There is no whip. They can't withdraw the whip. They can't stop you from being the nominee. The only thing that matters is you got more votes in the primary. Therefore, you are the nominee. The Democratic Party is what we say it is. So let's take advantage of that.
I also want to push on the sort of like establishment Democratic Party and the people that have proven more than anybody else that they're incapable of beating the right and incapable of beating fascism and of beating, the right wing and that has been the Democrats. The Democrats have proven that over and over again, be it from their unwillingness to keep Israel in check in their genocide in Gaza, be it the fact that they don't want to get behind popular policies that people want, be it the fact that they are, I mean, the fact that they're the most annoying nerds ever that just like focus on procedure as opposed to pushing for things that would actually benefit people's lives. So, and again, like part of the imperative for pushing for someone like AOC or pushing for this democratic project more broadly is the fact that the best way to beat the right wing is our politics. And this is why when you see, you know, Democrat-aligned media, they're not having people like a Sheik or Grace or any of these people from DSA, but they are showing up on right-wing media, on Fox News, because the right wing thinks that it'll just create chaos internally, which is an opportunity for us to get our message out as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we should all talk about what the Democratic Party really is, versus. Yep. I think the thing is like it can get confusing when you talk about this stuff because there's like a political science definition of a political party. There is the way that political parties operate in, say, parliamentary systems, and then there is the kind of really interesting coalitional type of party that America has, and the primary system, which is pretty unique in the democratic world, right? So in our country, we form coalitions prior to the general election, right? Whereas in other countries, like there would be a Green Party and a Socialist Party and a Communist Party and a Liberal Party and a Conservative Party and a right-wing party and a Fascist Party. Like there would be all these different parties, and they pick their candidates, right, in kind of a smoke-filled room, and they run, right? They get nominated, and the members pay money to join the party, right? And they give dues to their party, and the party could kick you out, in a kind of centralized way. That's not the way it is in America. So when people talk about like, we need to form this party or that party, it's not really how it functions. And in the United States, so it's not like other countries. So when we talk about like running as a Democrat, all we're really talking about is taking that statutorily beneficial, a ballot position. It's not like we have to accept, Zionism, or we have to accept, anti-Medicare for all. There is no policy you have to have and be a Democrat. That's just not true. So when we have like a ideological disagreement with the the right-wing centrist Democrats, okay, that doesn't affect us in any way. And in fact, like it might even be an advantage because when you think about politics and voting in general, if you win a primary, you're kind of eliminating that centrist Dem off of the general election ballot as a choice. So it becomes a lesser of two evil question for people that are maybe to our right, which is like, do you prefer democratic socialism of AOC, Zoran, Bernie Sanders, or do you prefer the MAGA fascism of Trump? And you kind of force a coalitional pressure on people that are slightly to our right to kind of force them a little bit to the left. And so that's electorally and ideologically to our advantage, right? And so that's why I think running in primaries is, as currently constituted, is a no-brainer, because why wouldn't you? If you can win, then you should. And so, like, what is the Democratic Party really? And this is the thing that I think gets really down in the weeds, and I apologize to the listeners, but I think it's necessary to talk about, which is it's really an incumbent protection racket combined with a class of people that live primarily in District of Columbia who are consultants. And they get, when you donate money to a politician and they spend it, it doesn't get thrown into a bonfire. It goes into someone's pocket.
It's an entire economy.
Whose pocket, right? Whose pocket? Well, it's a population of people that live in Arlington, Virginia, right? And they have, they buy boats to go out on the Potomac River and the Chesapeake Bay, and they get very rich at, charging fees to buy television ads and things like that. And the thing is, for their personal economy, the more money that is brought into campaigns, the richer they are. So their personal interest is having unlimited corporate money, having super PACs, having $1 billion, $2 billion, $3 billion campaigns, because that means their company, their consulting company, is richer. They personally get enriched. And so they have a vested interest in trying to push the Democratic Party towards this kind of collaborationist, right-wing corporate position, because that's where they make their money. And I think that is the kind of like crisis of our democracy. in public policy, we call this issue an agency problem, right? It's like if you have a organization or a company or whatever, and you're hiring someone and their personal interests are in the opposite of the interests of the organization as a whole, but they have the power over the organization, they're going to guide the organization to serve their interests. And that's called an alignment problem. And right now, the Democratic Party has a severe alignment problem. And this is also why, running AOC is so important as opposed to just focusing on local elections, because the president of the United States is in control of the party, and they can impose reforms on the national party that no other politician at the grassroots level or bubbling up is going to be able to do. So AOC is both a policy thing and a political necessity, because we need to kind of change the way our system functions to root out the oligarchic corruption. There was a study that was done back in 2014 from Princeton and Northwestern where they talked about how America is an oligarchy, not a democracy. And this is basically what they proved, is that the policies that get passed, it doesn't matter what the popular will is. It is what is the opinion of the wealthiest. If a policy is shared by the opinion of the wealthiest, then it passes. Between 70%, if none of the public supports it, but the richest do, it passes 70% of the time. If the rich supports it, the population supports it, it passes 100% of the time. But the opinion of the masses has no effect. It's only the opinion of the wealthiest that kind of dictates our policy. And so AOC, that's why we need a national campaign. That's why we need to take the White House. There's a lot of things that we can fix. It's not a panacea, but it gives us the ability to kind of realign our party and our politics more with the will and needs of the regular working class person. And fundamentally, what the question that is being asked. Just one more sentence that I think will I hope to transmit to everybody listening, which is people talk a lot about the establishment versus populism. Populism is a description of reality. And sometimes it is true and sometimes it is not true. And what is that description of reality? Populism is the belief that the elites of a society are not serving the interests of that society. And I think if you are a fair-minded person, whether the concept of populism appeals to you or not, it is just an objective fact that America's elites are no longer serving the interests of the everyday working American. And so we are in a crisis moment where we either realign the elites with our interests, or the society itself and our world as a whole is going to dangerously spin off in some direction that's unpredictable and certainly not good for regular people in this country and around the world. And so, that's why there's the fierce urgency of now. That's why we shouldn't wait to contend for national power. It's why we shouldn't wait for some more convenient season. We should go right now. We should go for it all. We should go big. We should go bold, and we should try to do it as soon as possible.
And even if we build the infrastructure and we come up short, just God forbid, I'm not saying that this is even necessarily a possibility. At least you even at the end have that infrastructure for other things as well. You can take what you construct by engaging with this campaign. You mentioned earlier that AOC started off as a bartender that volunteered for Bernie. Now she is a congressperson who is one of the most popular, best fundraising congressperson in all of the Congress. So by engaging with these campaigns, it almost creates a bit of a virtuous cycle where you're building your own bench, you're building your institutional knowledge, you're getting war-tested veterans that can move on to bigger and better things, level up, and run their own campaigns potentially. That part, when everybody talks about the left doesn't have a bench or whatever, this is the way that you get past that, by engaging with these processes that exist and building that institutional knowledge, building that experience, and creating those veterans.
My only fear with all that is that, I think you've even said it, Mike. I've listened to your streams a couple times. Is what do we do with the Democratic Party? Exactly what you're saying. I think to narrow it all down, who really their objective is not to win. Their objective, because they're fine with seeing progressives go down because it serves as discipline to the rest of their people, their candidates, whoever's going to run in the future, to fall in line, and that better things aren't possible. Because the threat of a Zoran Mandami, the threat of an AOC, the threat of a Al Said is like in Michigan is a threat to the actual Democratic Party. It's a threat to their status quo more than a threat of like a Trump presidency or a Republican winning a seat. Would you agree with that?
Okay, so, that's why I took pains to try to define the Democratic Party as I see it, right? So there is the Democratic Party, which is probably what all the listeners think of, which is themselves, right?
Yeah.
Good-hearted, regular people that are voting to try to make the country a better place, right? And then there is that class of consultants I spent so much time describing. For that class of consultants, you're right. But for the rest of us, you're dead wrong. It's fucking horrible for Democrats, the people, if the Republicans win. And I think this is what's unique. I think in 2016, I've always described Bernie Sanders as the left's Barry Goldwater, which is, if you're familiar with American history of Barry Goldwater, he was this kind of, libertarian conservative fusion of the post-civil rights era that was trying to reinvent republicanism for a new version that had national appeal. And he was running against LBJ, and he got his ass kicked. Okay, LBJ got over 60% of the popular vote. It was one of the biggest landslides in American history. He got completely destroyed. Okay, but the people that came out of the Barry Goldwater campaign eventually were the core of what led to the Reagan Revolution. Now, obviously, I think all of that is bad. But the same thing is happening with Bernie Sanders, which is when Bernie Sanders ran for the first time in 2016, it was an introduction to a new type of politics, right? That hadn't really been tried in America. And I don't think that the regular everyday person, probably a lot of people listening, were really ready they hadn't lost faith in the establishment Democratic Party. They hadn't lost faith in the establishment media. They hadn't lost faith in America's ability to solve problems and take on the challenges of the 21st century. Even if they liked Bernie Sanders personally, even if they thought a lot of his ideas were good, they still doubted that he would be able to pull it off. And I think now Bernie Sanders, that movement has matured with people like Zohran Mamdani, like AOC, to build a permanent political machine and finally and fully take advantage of the faith that has been lost in the establishment Democratic Party and politics in general. And we now have that opportunity to go after those people that you were talking about, the corrupt, sclerotic establishment Democratic Party.
Mike from PA, where can we find you? We have 1 minute left.
You can find me. I am a live streamer. I stream on twitch.tv/central_committee on twitch.tv every morning, which is 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific, starting every morning for 5 hours. You can also get me the Reaction podcast wherever podcasts are broadcast. And you'll see me out on the streets as well.
Yes, beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Mike. We'd love to have you back sometime. And thank you to everyone for listening. This is Good Morning Comrade. Listen to us every Monday morning at 10 a.m. On WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3, and find us on all of our stuff. GoodMorningComrade.com. Thank you. We love you. Bye-bye.